Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I want to introduce you to Jeff Ketelaars, who is head of the UFCW, the United Food and Commercial Workers.
That's correct. Yeah, Local 333, though. I'm not the head of the whole union. We're a million and a half strong across North America. So I represent Local 333, and we represent 10,000 security guards in Ontario.
10,000 security guards in Ontario. What do they secure? 10,000, that must be every single building in all of Ontario.
Well, and that's only 10% of the security guards in Ontario. There's 91,000 licensed security guards in this province. And those 91,000.
You're kidding, 91,000 security guards.
Correct, 91,000. I think the number that
your union's got to grow in size if it's only 10%, buddy.
Well, hopefully after this conversation, people will want to join up.
Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I apologize. But that's a surprising amount of security guards. I never would have fathomed that there was 90,000 security guards in Ontario alone.
Yeah, and so when you think about those numbers, you can see a police car go by with 2 policemen in it or police officers in it, and there's 4 security guards at the same time somewhere in that same area securing private property. The public police service is substantially smaller, and the ratio is actually 4 to 1.
4 to 1. There's 4 security guards for every 1 police person.
Correct.
That's amazing. And Jeff, you're the head of this local for the union.
Well, I'm the secretary treasurer, so I don't want the president to get his nose out of joint. Richard McNaught's the president. I'm the secretary treasurer, but I'm the director of the security division within the local. We represent both security guards and hospitality workers, but our campaign to get vaccinations going right now is more for the guards. As I'm sure you're aware, the hospitality sector is all but closed down right now.
Well, I think that, that's a huge issue, but we won't talk about it tonight. And so tell me, you are arguing that security guards should be declared an essential service and get the vaccination on a preferential basis, correct? And why?
Correct. So since the beginning of this pandemic, security guards have been on the front lines. And we hear the word frontline a lot. You hear the media says frontline workers. But when you think about it, a security guard is in front of the front lines. A grocery store worker is absolutely a frontline worker. They have to go to work. They have to sell food, groceries. They have to serve you at the counter. They have to deal with the public because we need to eat. But in front of every one of those grocery stores to get in, you had to pass a security guard. That security guard was controlling access and egress of the grocery stores. Before you could get into a hospital to get to a frontline worker, doctor, and nurses, and by no means am I suggesting that they're not working hard, because I know they are. But in almost every case, in every hospital in Ontario, from the beginning of the pandemic, you had to deal with the security guard at the front door, explain what you were doing there, why you were there, and the security guard had to be the one to determine whether you were going to have access to the hospital. So we were in front of the frontline workers throughout this entire pandemic. When pandemic pay was discussed, the government didn't even consider security guards. We pushed for pandemic pay, and they sort of half recognized security guards. When the pandemic began, there was a huge need for guards. In fact, there was more than 5,000 jobs available almost instantly when the pandemic began, and those jobs couldn't be filled because the government shut down the testing centers. And so the guards were forgotten when it came to pandemic pay, and the guards are being forgotten now when it comes to vaccinations. You look at any press conference that Mr. Ford gives, you see security guards standing somewhere in the background. You see any media pictures of vaccination sites, there's security guards controlling the access to get to the vaccines. And in most cases, those guards are not being vaccinated. They're sort of a forgotten group because most security guards are subcontract workers. So they don't work directly for the hospital. They work for a security guard company who provides the guard to the hospital. And another thing that I think everybody's forgotten, especially the government, is that those security guards don't necessarily work in the same place every day. So the guard could work today at a patient watch in the hospital, in an emergency room for a psychiatric patient who's on a Form 1, a mental health hold. The next day, he could be standing in front of a grocery store, controlling the access to the grocery store. And the next day, he could be in a condominium complex dealing with packages, thousands of packages being delivered by eBay and Amazon to your condominium complex. So not only are they in front of the front lines, but they're also moving around throughout society, taking buses, taking subways, and constantly in front of the most common points of exposure. So in our position, the local 333 security guards should be vaccinated or should be
So
given.
why have they been forgotten? What is it?
You know what? I don't know. We've sent polite letters. We started a campaign to a petition to the provincial government, and to be quite honest with you, nobody in the provincial government has taken the time to get back to us. We've got a couple of polite.
No one has even gotten back to you.
No, nobody has reached out to local 333 from the Conservatives in Ontario. Not one call.
And you represent 10,000 security guards, and your industry is 90,000 security guards in Ontario, and they haven't even gotten back to you.
Correct. When we pushed them on the issue of testing, to open up the testing centers or to put those online, they quietly went about doing that, and then they made an announcement a couple months ago changing the testing online, but they didn't really make any connection with us or with the industry either. I mean, you talk about security companies with 4,000 or 5,000 employees who have been saying to the government, we need vaccinations, we need to have streamlined testing and online testing. And even those companies couldn't get time or anybody from the government to respond other than a form letter. Now, to the government's credit, the form letters I've seen, they've at least moved the paragraphs around a little bit. So they paid a little bit of attention to make every form letter a little different. So, but the words were all the same.
Oh, God. So just out of interest, police, they are essential services and have gotten preferential vaccination, correct?
As far as I know, they have, yeah. Police, fire, and ambulance were all put on the preferential vaccination list, correct?
And, you talk about how a typical security guard could be working in numerous different places. That's normal because of their contracts?
Yeah, it's very normal. So there's a core group that'll work in the same place for extended periods of time, but there's just spitballing. But I think it would be safe to say 20 to 25% of security guards do not work at the same work site every day. They move around.
And so one of the challenges in long-term care was personal care workers that went from a long-term care facility to other one and effectively took the virus from one spot to another. And so what you're saying is that could also be happening with security guards. And so that's another rationale to vaccinate them.
Absolutely. And if you look, January 13th, Doug Ford announced he was going to put security guards in all the long-term care homes to control access. And when we asked them, are you going to at least make sure they're vaccinated? Again, there was no response at all. And I believe that it has been done in certain cases, and I think the overwhelming majority were done, but there was no concerted effort. It really fell to the hospitals and the long-term care homes to decide if they were going to include the guards or not.
Unbelievable. That's quite the issue. So what do you think needs to happen? You're obviously on a campaign. Should security guards go on strike?
Well, if you ask me, yeah, they should go on strike. They should been going on strike many times over the years. We've made great strides. Security guards have only been legally allowed to organize in Ontario for a little bit over 25 years. There was prohibitions to guards even joining unions up until the NDP government in Ontario, the only NDP government in Ontario. So security guards they're sort of new at being unionized. Up until the last Bill 148 passed by the Liberals, security guards would actually be working at a building. A new contractor could come in and they could lower their wages, take away their benefits, and make them non-union. And so the Liberals were able to fix that. There's now successor rights, so that the new employer has to honor the benefits, has to honor the collective agreement, et cetera. So those little improvements have been coming very slow. But I think everybody should really look around. I think anybody in this province, if you just take a moment and look around, you will see a security guard who you interact with every day, almost everywhere you go. You'll see them sitting on the bus next to you. You'll see them in grocery stores. You'll see them at department stores. You see them in the malls. There is a security guard everywhere. And you'd be amazed. For example, the federal government's hired 500 security guards in Ontario alone just to follow up on people quarantining. So if you come back into the country and you're forced to quarantine, you could get a knock on your door or a phone call from a security guard who's been hired by public health to follow up to make sure you're following the guidelines.
What
If
kind
you,
of training do security guards get?
in Ontario, it's a 40-hour training course is mandated. Then they have to have first aid and CPR, and then they write the provincial test. So it's a very minimal amount. Most of the training is actually provided by the industry itself. So for example, if you wanted to work at the Immigration Detention Center, there's additional training that's mandated by the employer there and Immigration Canada, who will give you additional training to work in that environment. But the minimum is a 40-hour course.
Are they armed?
No, most guards are not armed in Ontario. In fact, the law in Ontario is you can only carry a firearm to protect property. You actually can't carry a firearm to protect people. So security guards are not armed unless they're working for Brinks. It's not Brinks anymore, I guess. Garda is the primary cash and transit company. Those guards are armed, but they are actually not security guards. So if you're working on one of those trucks, you don't have to have a security guard license.
So the other side of your union represents, Jeff, hospitality workers. Is that correct?
Yeah, the other side of our local. Again, we're a big union. We have 250,000 members across the country. We represent everything you could imagine, from volunteer fire workers to Loblaws, grocery stores, etc. But our local, the other side of our local, represents hospitality workers, workers at Four Seasons Hotel, for example, and some of the limited service hotels in and around the GTA. And so that's a group that's been significantally hard hit by.
Oh my gosh, Jeff, like devastated. What are you doing for them?
Well, first of all, we've been trying to offer them, well, not trying, we actually have been providing them training to move into the security guard sector, because there's a huge demand for guards right now. So we've been giving them free training and getting them licensed in the security guard sector to help them out. The federal government was really good to the hospitality sector. A lot of the bigger hotels were able to use the government subsidies to sort of as a pass-through. But those workers, they're in tough shape right now. I mean, a lot of hotels are 2, 3, under 10% occupancy right now. There's a few hotels that have been turned into quarantine hotels, but a lot of the people who work in the quarantine hotels aren't actually the workers who would work in the hotel when it's operating as a hotel, because you need more of a healthcare specialist to work in the building when you're dealing with the quarantine. So most of those workers are laid off. We're doing the best we can, as I said, to offer them any training that we can to get them into other positions.
What do you think is going to happen? Some people think that the economy is going to come back and it's going to be like the Roaring '20s in 1920s after the Spanish flu, and people are going to go crazy and party and.
Well, I hope that that's going to happen. I hope everyone will travel and go to lots of hotels and be big tippers and Gesundheit.
Thank you. Sorry.
And no, I hope they will. I hope they'll go back. I hope travel. I suspect one thing is that as these vaccination and this herd immunity, whatever that really is, comes to pass, I think people are going to travel a lot more locally. I think that I personally think that provincial government should be offering subsidies to individuals to travel within Ontario. Wouldn't it be nice to get a tax break if you went to Stratford for the weekend and your hotel room became tax deductible as a way to keep money flowing around in the economy?
Well, I think that that's a great suggestion, because I do think people are going to want to travel, but because of the difference in vaccination rates in different countries and the growth of variants, we're going to have to keep international travel at a minimum for a while.
Yeah, I think so. And I think people are going to be a little nervous to travel internationally. So I think anything that the government could do to offer a subsidy, we've proposed it in different ways to different MPPs to say, hey, what about a tax, just like a break of some sort? Imagine if you could write off $1,000 for local travel in 2021, 2022. It would get you out of your house when it's safe to get out of your house, and it would keep you local, and it would be great for the local economy. So, I mean, there's some great places close to home that we don't think about.
Jeff Ketelaars, who is the Secretary Treasurer of Local 333 of the Union of Food and Commercial Workers. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Last question. If people support you and your efforts to get security guards designated as essential and get to the front of the line of vaccinations, what can they do?
They can go to ufcw333.ca and they can sign our petition to Doug Ford and let him know that they appreciate the security guards and what they do. And if you see a security guard, maybe say thanks, because they are protecting Ontarians. They're very, very underappreciated.
Jeff, thanks so very much for joining us tonight and telling us about the issue.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's our show for tonight. It's the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I'm on every Monday through Friday at 7 o'clock on 960 on your AM dial, or you can stream me online at www.saga960am.ca, or you can get all my podcasts and videocasts after the fact on briancrombie.com, on Spotify, on Audible, any of those podcast services. And all my videos are on briancrombie.com or my YouTube channel, Brian Crombie. Thanks for joining us. Good night, everybody. Thanks, Jeff.
Hey, thank you. Have a great night.